Good morning, LA. This is Luke Phillips here with Shariff, Mordechai, Hazan down on Pico Boulevard, and we're going to have a conversation today on a project Shariff has been working on called the Small Business Enhancement Act.
No, the Social Media Business Enhancement Act.
The Social Media Business Enhancement Act,
Yeah.
yes. So, Shariff, if you want to just go ahead and give a brief overview.
Yeah, basically the Social Media Business Enhancement Act is a response to the 80 million jobs that are going to be lost in the United States over the next 10 years due to technological innovation, specifically with robot technology. In dealing with the displacement of those workers, like what do we do with those workers? We've had other acts like, or different programs like the Trade Assistance Program that takes displaced workers that were affected by trade, and it retrains them to go into the job market. Well, the issue is now is that because of robot technology, those skill set workers that no longer have a job, can't go back into the private sector because those jobs are not there. And not only do we have an issue in terms of the 80 million jobs that are going to be lost because of robot technology, the other 50% of those jobs are being marginalized every day because of global outsourcing. So my solution I'm bringing to the table is saying that, well, we need to create a program in the private sector that works in association with government, but mostly more private sector based, that takes the people who are displaced from robot technology, re-enters them into the junior college system where they learn the fundamentals of entrepreneurship and business development, and that there's a support system out there, whether it's from independent financial institutions or maybe some government programs. We don't want to expand government, but we want to be able to work in conjunction with government to deal with this issue and to take those people and give them assistance to have the first stages of starting their own business. And me being a congressperson, creating legislation that's going to allow them to compete on a global level by reducing things like the corporate business tax and the import-export tax, and being able to create an environment where small businesses can innovate and not necessarily compete with the same standards of mid-sized and large businesses.
I think it's a fantastic notion, and you hit on a couple really important trends. Number one, the kind of dual divergence away from traditional labor in both the manufacturing sector, where machines are increasingly doing a lot more of the manufacturing, and even in the old traditional white-collar jobs like bank clerks and stuff like that, where computers are doing more of that work. But not only that, a lot of this stuff is being outsourced to other countries due to just the natural fact of globalization that isn't about to be reversed anytime soon. So we have a lot of work to do, and I think you're rightly focusing on how do you give people the skills they need to do this, and how do you change the regulatory environment and the tax environment so that you can have this more entrepreneurial spirit made more available to more people. Now, I have one big question. So your model focuses on the entrepreneur and the small business. Mm-hmm. Now, as I'm sure you're aware, in the United States today, small business is very broadly defined as any business that employs 499 people or less. Mm-hmm. So what we would think of when we think of a small business, like a 10 to 20 person business, is lumped together with what are basically medium-sized businesses in a lot of cases. And so my question for you is, given that data, and given the fact that a lot of medium-sized businesses are mass employers too, how do you get to a mass employment economy based solely on small business, or do you have to integrate it with medium-sized business and big business policy too?
The thing is, it's like, we're in the idea-based economy, and the idea-based economy is really based around the individual's ability to aggregate, whether it's their intellectual capital or social capital, and being able to use that as an asset to exchange on the global economy. So like when we talk about small and mid-sized businesses or even large businesses in America, you know, we're really talking about, you know, people, you know, that are connecting to other people, you know. So that mid-sized business that exists today, a large part of that business is infrastructure, you know, and that infrastructure is also being marginalized because of robot technology and global outsourcing. So as we go forward over the next 10 years and 20 years, we're talking about an economy that's based off of individuals interconnected with common objectives of whether it's bartering or idea exchange or resource exchange or resource collaboration. And so that's the frame that, you know, we should really look at, you know, and also think about the idea of that individual, specifically in America's capacity to affect economies around the world, you know, by different forms of social innovation, whether it's ideas or, you know, some form of technological support or whatnot. But like it's really more so about liberating the individual's ability to impact the global economy as an individual, and not necessarily like, oh, well, I'm creating a small business, so I have to employ all these people. I don't know if that world exists anymore. You know, I think those people who are traditional employees are also now going to be collaborators and idea providers as well.
So let me put this another way. So there are roughly two models of the social contract in the history of the United States. Mm-hmm. The social contract being the individual's economic relationship with their government. So the 19th century idea was the government would drive down the price of land by acquiring huge swaths of land in the American West, so that individuals could be more independent farmers, independent proprietors on their own land, and compete in the global agricultural economy that way. The 20th century idea was the government would partner with big corporations like the Exxon Mobils, like the General Electrics, and those, and help those companies to remain stable, so that they would provide mass employment to millions of Americans. So if I understand this correctly, your idea of a new social contract through the Social Media Business Enhancement Act would look more like the 19th century model, where the government employs certain policies to help people become more independent on their own, to participate in the national and global economy on their own 2 feet, rather than as a part of General Electric or General Motors or one of those corporations.
Yeah, you know, and the thing is, I feel like it's even, you know, it's even like it's that idea, but it's also even more that we're saying that the idea of America isn't just about, you know, being middle class and surviving and paying bills. That being American is about pursuing your dreams, and it's about looking to the potential of who you could become. And so the idea of removing or reducing greatly the regulations that government has put on, you know, the business space or the private sector, and specifically with small businesses, it's a civil rights issue, because America is not just about surviving. America is about wealth creation. And now that we're in globalization, we want an environment where everybody has an opportunity to compete and to contribute to America on a global level, and create like a new consciousness of wealth, you know, and a new consciousness of wealth creation. So yeah, it is about the government participating, but the idea is saying, hey, you know, asking the government to kind of take a step back and just allow innovation to happen, you know, allow the creativity to happen, allow the banks from around the world that would traditionally invest in, like, say you could take the African American community, for example. It's like the African American community has like literally generated hundreds of billions of dollars through art and innovation that the African American community has not capitalized on, you know, has not been able to capitalize on in America. And a lot of it has to do with the lack of investment capital, the accessibility of investment capital in the African American community in the context of credit scores and a lot of things that were set up that was very difficult for a guy who had some innovation, who maybe not have had so much education or resources or whatnot, and to be able to get, you know, mainstream funding, unless they went to a company, like say in the context of art, you know, how many talented African American quote unquote intellectual property creators that we're calling musicians have existed, but the only way they could exploit their content or their product was through investment through a record company that received investments from another entity. And so now what we're saying now is like that third party can now deal directly with the talent in the content, in the product, in the creator, you know, on a grassroots house to laptop to bedroom level, you know. And you know, one of the things that I've been working on in the private sector, you know, if you Google me, you see a lot of stuff about like the jerkin movement and the skinny jeans movement and all these different movements. But the you know, people say like, oh wow, you know, these are kids dancing and performing and all this stuff. But really underneath that is people taking their social culture and exploiting it through social media, you know. And that world is something that I felt was important to spread all over the world, and that's why those movements are global. We're taking it to the next level and saying like, hey, the whole generation, this is what they're doing. They're not going to be able to, if you're in elementary school right now or junior high, you know, you're not going to be able to go and get a job in the same way that, you know, a person like your peers will be able to do in 6 months or 12 months, you know. And so we want to create an atmosphere where that young person could come out of high school and have all these talents and motivations and inspirations and say, hey, you know, where can I go? What assistance can I get to exploit that? What assistance can I get to learn how to build infrastructure and then learn how to distribute, you know, my product and how to market my product and how to recoup the money and how to pay taxes and how to open my bank accounts? How do I have that support? And then that support allows investors to feel like, oh, okay, well, these people, you know, who have these new types of businesses know what they're doing and have the ability to sustain it through education. And, you know, and it's going to be a learning curve to the whole model. But the point is saying that wealth creation through this era of the idea-based economy is now open to the smartest people, regardless of their race, creed, or color. Like the smartest are going to rise to the top, and that's just going to make America become an example to the rest of the world. Because, you know, it's not just about the economy; it's also about national security. When we think about, you know, the world in the future, you know, what's gonna stop war? You know, what's gonna stop war? One, trade, not trade just between governments, but trade between regular people, right? Because a lot of times, a lot of these countries, especially in the East, you know, have governments that don't represent the people, you know, and you can see that in places like Iran and Egypt or whatnot. So we want to create a dynamic where Americans, young Americans, can trade and share intellectual properties and be able to expand their consumer base on a grassroots level in places all around the world. That's one idea. And then the second idea is to say that, you know, when we think about national security, it's not just about going to war with people in the future. You know, that things are become more interconnected. So how do we expand the American idea? You know, how do we open up our gates of a free market and a democracy to the rest of the world? And that's by being an example, you know? That's about being an example of goodness, of creativity, of ethics and morals. And that comes from a culture where people learn how to value each other, you know, and learn how to see the value in themselves and see the value in other people, and being able to put that into an economic context where they can support their family from value, understanding and value exchange. And that type of human relationship is what is going to change the world, because the world ultimately wants to love. Every human being wants to love. Every human being wants to be loved. And something on that process from being an infant to an adult, sometimes that gets jaded, and a lot of it has to do with environment. And so what we're saying is going forward is that we want the American idea to represent human exploration, human potential, human creativity. And that is what's going to make people around the world say, hey, you know what? That American way of living, that's me. That's what I want to be a part of. And so the Social Media Business Enhancement Act, yes, it moves us forward in terms of being a more independent private sector and a more individualistic within a collaborative structure economy, but also at the same time, we're showing the rest of the world that creativity human expression in the cultivation of the individual spirit is a mode of happiness and experience that they want to be a part of.
Whole lot to digest there, Shariff.
Yeah.
But let's focus on one of the earlier points you brought up on directly opening up streams of capital to young individual talents all over the place, regardless of where they come from.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a fantastic idea. And I'm actually reading a biography of Alexander Hamilton right now by Forrest McDonald, where the argument is the genius of Hamilton's financial plan back in the 1790s was it instead of like old aristocratic hierarchy and rank being the main thing in American society that defined what you were worth. Hamilton's plan that opened up capital to entrepreneurs and strivers all across America made your work and how much money you could make based on your work more of what you were more of a factor of what you were worth than just the old title. And I would argue that you're hitting on a very important point, that today in America we don't necessarily have a class hierarchy the same way we did back in Jefferson's Republic, but we have your number of opportunities that you can get is largely limited by the environment you grow up in. If you're in a middle class background, if you're in a lower class background, if you're in an upper class background. So I think the Social Media Business Enhancement Act, if it succeeds in opening up streams of capital to people from all backgrounds, would be able to provide a path to the top for people from wherever they come from, be that South Central LA or Watts or Central Appalachia or the Great Plains, the middle of Podunk nowhere. Regardless of where they're from, it can open up that for the top 1%, the top 2% of people who are doing stuff. Now, the question for you I have at the moment is, what do you do about the other 98%? How do you make sure that these kinds of opportunities are open to other people who might not necessarily be the most creative and might not necessarily be the most entrepreneuring individuals, but still have a right to participate in the American experiment and in the great American idea that you've just been discussing about individuation and creativity and entrepreneurship?
The thing, it's a great question. The thing is, a lot of programs that people created, like other people have created programs too, that were to improve the economy, gear the economy, and those programs haven't really worked because a lot of, one of the key economic ideas is like there's like a demand curve, right? There's a demand for a specific type of industry, and based off of the demand of the demand, the success of the program. Because if there isn't a demand for it, and you have this great idea and no one has a demand for it, it's not going to work. So, like, say for instance, 60% of the United States has, Facebook profiles and is sharing content, right now. And when we think about a valuable asset in the future, it's like, information. We're in the information age. And so when you think about the 2 to 3 billion people that are now involved in capitalism because of the fall of communism and the World Trade organizations that have created all these huge partnerships between us and countries like China, that, going forward is that even people who aren't, singers and dancers and all these great talents, still have the ability to contribute intellectual properties from their own life experiences and their own information. It's like when people go to a job, they fill out a resume. And on that resume, it's really just outlining what information they can contribute to that organization. Even though that information may physically be a practice, it's still information they acquired. So they were trained here, they went to this college or whatnot. And so now what we're saying is that same person who would in a way limit themselves to that one corporation now sees themselves as having information for corporations all around the world and using social media and the internet as this tool to engage that. So what we're saying is like, we're not saying like certain skill sets some skill sets are obsolete, but then there's a whole new world of contribution and demand that's there. So the Social Media Business Enhancement Act isn't something that creates a new economy or subjects the private sector to this new idea that I think is great. You know, it's about, this is what the people are doing. This is what the next generation is doing. Like we're recording this, you know, interview. This interview is a form of is a form of content that is going to be distributed and has value, and the text has value. You know what I mean? And so, yeah. So like, are you a journalist? No, but can you? You know, when I say journalist, I'm saying, do you work for a publication that you filled out a resume to, and therefore they hired you to write stories? It's like, no, you're an independent journalist, independent writer, independent political analyst, and you're able now to work with that same corporation or content provider that normally traditionally you would have. So now it's taking that same idea, and there's people all over the world that are going to cover things in American politics and Los Angeles politics because they have interest, because of trade and other.
So everybody can be, in a way, an independent contractor or an independent consultant to any number of other people, any number of other corporations and small businesses and stuff like that, and their skills can flow freely on an open market of innumerable possibilities. And through the social media world that we have nowadays, there are only more and more ways for people to connect with people locally, but also on the other side of the globe and the other side of the continent to do this kind of stuff. So it creates a kind of accessibility of individual reservoirs of talent that before the age of social media may never have been possible.
Yeah, 100%. It wasn't possible, and you know, it's really about, you know, we're in a time, you know, where it's about expanding our minds, you know, and it's really about, you know, visualizing, like, you know, some people say like, well, you know, how many, you know, music artists could we possibly have, you know, that are popular, or how many movies could be out there, or how many books could be written? I mean, it's only so much, but that thinking comes from shelf space. You know, going into retail stores and seeing so much shelf space. But it's like when you think about like Apple iPods, the idea of being able to have a whole catalog of music, you know, in your pocket, that idea was insane, you know, 30, 40 years ago. You know what I mean? And so, you know, to think that the children 10 years from now, or 15 years from now, or 20 years from now, are going to have favorite recording artists from maybe, you know, 6 different continents, you know, and are interested in movies and themes in, you know, 250 cities around the world. You know, we can't imagine it because that's not our mind space. But people, you know, say 30 years ago, if you said like, hey, I have a whole catalog of music for the last 20 years that I love in my pocket that I listen to every morning going to work, they'd be like, how could such a thing exist? So, you know, just really, it's really about expanding our mind and creating new ideas. And this isn't, like I said, this isn't my philosophy. This is the demand of the people. This is what the people are doing. This is what their vision is. And this is what they're doing every day. Like when I worked the jerky movement, the skinny jeans movement, those were, you know, hundreds of thousands of kids around the world that generated billions of views because the accessibility of technology and broadband technology on their cell phone was accessible for the first time. So from that explosion happened. And so what we're seeing now is it's like the whole entire private sector is in that space. It's like, well, people are ordering their groceries. They're not going to stores anymore. You know what I mean? They're not, you know, cars are becoming computers themselves. You know what I mean? Like it's just keeps going. So we need legislation for that. And the thing is, the difference between me and Karen Bass is that Karen Bass is, you know, was great for that old model, that brick and mortar model of how things work, and people went to work and they got unemployed and they, you know, they needed assistance, and you know, we wanted to, you know, deal with foster care issues in Africa. You know, all those things are great and important, but if we're not creating legislation based off of this new marketplace, we're doing a disservice to the community. You know, because like the kids that are at Audubon and in Cochrane Middle School and Crenshaw High School, and they're going to be there 10 years from now. If we're not creating legislation where they can come out of school and compete in the global economy, we are robbing them in a way that we can't imagine. The Social Business Enhancement Act is a civil rights issue. if these kids and these young people are not introduced into this element, and this isn't an African American issue, this is African American, Hispanic, and white, and Asian, anyone who is not going to inherit wealth, it's a civil rights issue for them to be engaged in the global economy.
For those who are not aware, Shariff is actually running for the 39th district?
37th.
The 37th district of the United States Congress against incumbent Karen Bass. That's here in downtown Los Angeles, and you'll be seeing more from that soon. Now, Shariff, in the interest of our viewers' time, we should probably start wrapping up, but I just have two last questions for you. So the first one is, what are 3 specific policies you would put in place in the Social Media Business Enhancement Act that would either lower barriers to competition or provide incentives for young people to get more involved in the global economy? What are 3 specific policies that you would put down in this legislation on your first day in Congress?
Yeah, so the first act of legislation would be to address the import and export tax on small businesses, and also the overall corporate business tax. The third thing that I would introduce is different incentives, and that would be from a collaborative space with other representatives, to create an environment where banks would have incentives to invest into these companies, whether it's different subsidies or different creative ways to make it beneficial for them to go through the research and development process of building this new economy. So the first two things would be to address the corporate and import-export tax for small businesses, and then also to be able to address the different opportunities, and again, that's a collaborative dynamic with banks for foreign and domestic banks to invest into these new era businesses. But it also would require to collaborate with the state assembly person and city council person, because the incubation process for this business is going to come through the junior college system. So people who have innovations that are losing their jobs would be able to go into this junior college system, and we would have to be able to put some type of economic support in place for these people as they go through that transition. So the exact dynamic of the tax cuts or breaks or incentives from the banks will largely have to do with the collaborations with the other parties, because it's a bipartisan issue.
So what you're talking about is a complete paradigm shift in how we view work and how we view incentives and how we view the barriers to success. Yeah. You should write a book, Shariff. You really should.
No, you should. And then one last point is, we're talking about economic mobility.
Right.
And that's the key thing. That's the key thing, is that it's not that everyone is going to jump and want to do the Social Media Business Enhancement Act, but what we're doing is we're taking something that's relevant and tangible to the average everyday American citizen and giving them a gap, a bridge to economic mobility, which is the ability to change your economic position. If that's not what you want to do, that's fine. But because of the job collapse, we're responsible as legislators, as representatives, to put policies in place that are going to allow the next generation to be able to compete and receive monies and to be educated, and so yeah, it's a different shift. And again, that's the dynamic with the Karen Bass model. In closing, is that because I've been working in the private sector for the last 8 years, creating community organizing models, working with the private sector, getting different political dynamics involved with these social media-based businesses. And so now I'm going to that next phase, which is representing the people that want this movement, which is our next generation, and being able to, put the acts in place, through a collaborative. And again, these are bipartisan dynamics. I'm not a Republican going around saying like, oh, hey, let's get rid of the IRS and let's get rid of healthcare. I'm saying like, no, the people in my community have tremendous talent. In South Central Los Angeles, which is in my district, have had tremendous talent that have created like most of the art that you see in pop culture today, specifically in hip hop, and being able to create an environment where all those young minds that not only, are a part of that, but also inspired by that to compete on a global level. And in that example being something that spreads, God willing, around America.
Well, Sharif, this has been a fascinating conversation, and I look forward to the next one. We at Republicans of LA will be hoping to host a couple panel events, and we'll definitely be inviting you to that. So look for this conversation on the Republicans of LA YouTube site. Probably we'll be putting up an article at Fox and Hounds too. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Everybody, Shariff Mordechai Hazan, the next congressman from the 37th District of California.
Thank you.
This is Luke Phillips, and it's been a pleasure to serve you.
Do you think the background with the car is going to be too much?
I think it should be okay, but we'll listen to it real quick to see how it works.